Okay, I'm going to go ahead and talk about some administrivia, and then we can jump into the actual presentation or discussion. So, uh, first of all, great to meet you all. My name is Ben Bridgetta. I'm Senior Director of SOC Operations at Expel. I joined Expel about 6 months after they formed as the ninth employee overall, and I'm responsible for hiring and training the analysts. And so, like most of the folks or all of the folks on this or listening to this, um, burnout is near and dear to my heart. It's something I care deeply about. Um, so for this discussion, it's very helpful if it's interactive. We're going to have about 8 to 10 minutes at the end to take questions from the audience. So please feel free to pop those into the Q&A section, which is distinct from the chat section. So use the Q&A on that little bar. We'll talk about those at the end. The other thing is we have some interactive polls that are going to pop out throughout the discussion. Please engage with those as well. So with that, let's get started. So what are we trying to get out of this this discussion here? Like, why did you attend? Well, as we all know, cybersecurity is a really hard job. There's relentless attackers on the other end. Like if you make a mistake, it shows up in the news. Budgets are tight. So this industry is known for having burnout, and that is distinct from known for working a lot. A lot of the times that people get into this burnout stage, it's not actually related to how much they're working. It's related to the aspects of the job that the business can impact. So we want to have some experts come in and talk about what they've seen over their careers, the what and why, the impact of those things, and then what we can do about it. So what do we want to leave with? What do we hope you get out of this? Again, be able to recognize the signs, talking about the what and why. Understand the risk to your organization, to your job, to your ability to complete the mission, which is protect your environment, and then learn how to go about driving down that burnout so that people are able to be more effective in their role, uh, both near-term strategies and longer-term strategies as well. And with that, let's get to the important part. I'm going to pass the mic to the our guests who are going to talk through their backgrounds and their perspectives and what they bring. So, Phil.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, my name is Phil Serio. I'm the Director of IT Security and Compliance at Hershey Entertainment Resorts. So if you're not familiar with us specifically, I'm sure you've heard of Hershey Chocolate. We're kind of the sister company of that. Originally part of the same organization, but broken out many years ago. And we have everything that's the hospitality and entertainment side. So Hershey Park, the amusement park, hotels, golf courses, things like that, concert venues and everything. I've been with the organization for about just shy of 18 years now, in various roles in the IT department. So I've kind of come up through the ranks and seen things from different perspectives in IT, from the support, technical services side through our data center into our security team, and now leading the teams on the security compliance side. So hopefully things that I talk about are meaningful or hit home for certain individuals and stuff like that. So great to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Phil. And then over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Ben. Hi, my name is Joe Klein. I've been a Chief Information Security Officer for 7 years now, starting out at a Fortune 1000 industrial battery manufacturing firm where I built a security program from the ground up. Spent a few years there and then went on to a fintech SaaS company where I led the security program after a major breach and helped that organization recover and ultimately IPO. And most recently, the managing partner and CISO at Secure Strategies. So we're a boutique cybersecurity firm, and my team and I provide virtual Chief Information Security Officer services to small to mid-sized businesses. So for companies that are 100 to 1,000 people in size who can't necessarily afford a full-time CISO, we provide that service on a fractional basis with a dedicated CISO to help them assess, plan, build, and operate their security program.
Awesome. So as you all can see, we have both the deep perspective and then a wide perspective as well. So I don't know about you all, but for me, one of the things that I run into in security a lot is like, am I the only one who's experiencing this? And being able to have this perspective will hopefully help us talk about burnout in an effective way. So before we get into it, we want to set the stage. We don't believe that burnout is something that is just an employee issue. Expel has strong opinions on this as well, and we have extensive documentation, or we wrote an ebook about it. Check it out. And with that, let's get underway. We're going to talk about the what and why, the impact, and then strategies to handle it in that order. So first, let's talk about the what and why. Joe, do you mind talking to us about what your perspective on burnout is?
Absolutely, Ben. One of the things that I see across many organizations, first and foremost, is just the repetitive tasks. Because of the nature of cybersecurity, most organizations are doing repetitive tasks, things like monitoring a SIM, monitoring alerts from your various tools and telemetry sets. And as many of you might know, looking for alerts, looking for true positives and indicators of compromise in a potential attack is like looking for a needle in a pile of needles. It's very, very tedious. And the people who often do that in large organizations, they're staring at those screens day after day. It just causes a lot of burnout, a lot of repetitive tasks. So I look at what are those high volume tasks, what are the lower value tasks that potentially we could shift to third parties. Other examples, for example, are third-party questionnaires. So how many of you are receiving questionnaires from your partners? And of course, they're using different formats. They have different questionnaires online, spreadsheets. In some organizations, I've had team members exclusively fill out those questionnaires, and it is a less than enriching experience, I'll say. And then on the other side of things, your third-party vendor risk management program, hopefully you're evaluating your technology partners and looking at who are the vendors that are most critical to your business operations, what vendors are going to store your most sensitive data, and query those vendors before procuring those services and assessing what their security posture is and monitoring that security posture on an ongoing basis. Again, many of my customers have 200, 300, even 800 third-party vendors. So keeping track of that, both from a technology perspective and from a collaboration perspective with those partners is really, really tedious. Vulnerability management is another example, especially if you've classified your assets, if you have a policy around how you handle vulnerabilities and the constant triaging of those vulnerabilities, ticketing those vulnerabilities, and even things like phishing and sending phishing emails as part of your awareness and training program can be very, very time consuming, just looking through that catalog, whatever partner you leverage, and constantly sending those tests, monitoring them, monitoring the progress of those are really, really tedious. So those things that people are doing over and over and over again, day after day, I think is a contributing factor there.
That makes sense. So, a lot of the folks in cybersecurity are mission driven. They got into this because they want to find evil. And then if they wind up doing a job where it's this repetitive task over and over and they don't feel that connection to the mission, that can really make it hard to show up the next day and do the right thing.
Yeah, and Ben, I would add on to that too, is just the change in focus can add to the burnout as well. I know with our organization, like we've got a small team, so some of those tasks that Joe was throwing out there are things that we do, but that's not the primary focus. So, when you're in the middle of a strategic initiative, like working on a project for something, and then all of a sudden you have to get redirected because, hey, part of our duties is a SOC analyst, and we just got an alert from our our service and we need now triage this and figure out what's going on, like you're completely shifting your focus to go over here and take care of whatever this is. And it's like, okay, now I got to mentally shift myself back, right? And that constant redirection sometimes, depending on, you know, like in our case, like we have an on-call rotation. If you're on the call, you're the one handling those triage of the alerts. And if you're constantly shifting your focus, you know, that could be, you know, it kind of bring it down a little bit of like, I didn't get anything done because I kept having to fight fires.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, like that. So it's either the repetitive tasks that you feel like you could automate and you know are not meaningful to the organization in a large place, or for someone in your shoes, it's in addition to the rest of their job. And it's this high impact, low frequency thing that pops up that then you have to stop what you're doing and do for the first time maybe that day or that week. Is that accurate?
Yeah, more, yeah, first time of the day, multiple times a day, sometimes, you know, depending on what it is, it's just that shift of focus where it completely takes you off the rails of what you were doing and trying to shift to something else.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like the context switching is challenging. It impacts the thing you were doing already. And then when you're doing work that doesn't feel like it matters, both of those things are gonna drive high burnout.
Yep.
Great, it's great points, Bill. And in addition to wearing multiple hats, how many of us are being asked by leadership, you know, work smarter, do more with less? And in addition to wearing those hats and taking on more responsibility, we're asking our employees to be on call. Unfortunately, the adversaries are and threat actors are throughout the world, and we don't have the luxury of asking them to work 8 to 5, 8 to 6. They're working sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning. So we ask our employees to be on call. And one of the challenges with being on call, if you have an immature security program, is you're getting a lot of false positives. You're getting a lot of alerts from your EDR tools and your various technologies that are out there. So that requires an employee 3 o'clock in the morning to wake up because they got a high alert from CrowdStrike or Microsoft, SentinelOne, whatever you're using. But a lot of times we, you know, perk up, we pour a cup of coffee and look at that high severity alert, only to find out, oh, it was high severity, but the EDR tool blocked it. It's okay. So that's just one of many, many false positives where you might have an employee on call for a week and then they shift to somebody else and they're getting, you know, 3, 4, 5 tickets during that week in the middle of the night, in which most of them do not require attention. They don't require that triaging, but they're still being woken up.
Yeah, the real life impact of those on calls, you know, leaving your kid's birthday party to go triage a false positive, it starts to be a pretty stark contrast, you know, easy to remember example of the things that you know, where it didn't feel like it mattered. So to summarize the what and why, you know, high volume, low value, or low volume, super high value, the unrelenting nature is just always there. And then feeling like the work that you're doing isn't connected to the mission. You know, it's not driving actual value, and it's sometimes getting in the way of the other stuff. So let's move to talking about impact then. You know, what have you seen, Phil, is the impact of burnout on your organization?
Yeah, I would say one of the main point is just around efficacy, right, of the employee themselves. Like if you're feeling burnout and you have all these tasks to do and you're burned out with it, your effectiveness to do those tasks to completion or even 100% or accurate is going to diminish, right? You know, it kind of like back example before, like if I'm working on a project, right, and then I get sidetracked because I just got an alert I have to triage, right? I'm going to look at it and be like, oh man, this is a nuisance. I was making good progress on this project. Now I go over here. I'm just trying to check this thing off and get it done so I can get back to what I was doing. So the efficacy goes down, right? So am I going to triage that 100%? Am I going to pull back all the data or evidence I need to make sure I can make a correct decision on that, you know, alert from our EDR system, whatever it is? You know, so you're less effective. Or even any of those other tasks. Like, you know, Joe had mentioned the idea of like third-party risk management or going through contract reviews. Like if I'm not effective with that, I could miss language that could be in a contract, or I may miss or not review something on that third-party risk assessment questionnaire that I need to address that, just like, well, I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of just lose that effectiveness as an employee. And then overall, I mean, that can lead up potentially to turnover eventually, right? If they're feeling that burned out to a point where they can't kind of rebound from that, you may have that potential issue of turnover, and you start losing employees, which then kind of compounds itself, because now you're like, okay, now we've got to cover those responsibilities until we can rehire, or how do I adjust for that gap in staffing, which then could cause the other employees that may be feeling a little bit to feel it more, right? So it may start to compound itself potentially. And the impact can go everywhere. I mean, I know we talk about a lot of those like repetitive tasks and stuff like that, and sometimes that's more of the the analyst level employee, but it can go across your entire staff. I mean, even up into the leadership positions, like, if somebody in a leadership role is feeling burnout, how much care are they going to put into their security program? Maybe they're not worried about moving that needle and maturing the program because they're feeling burned out themselves. So it can go to all levels of the organization.
Joe, have you
Agreed.
seen, sorry, go on.
I completely agree. And I think it comes down to motivation. When you have repetitive tasks that you're doing over and over and over again, it just gets extremely mundane. And sometimes when you're asked to focus on those tasks with a large portion of your day, it also becomes challenging for employees to see their career progression. Where can I get that next skill? Where can I get that security experience to take my career to the next level? It's challenging when employees feel like they're just, making the same cookie over and over and over again.
Yeah. The like the attackers are evolving and growing, and you're not, right? You're standing stagnant in those moments. Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that we had talked about when we were meeting each other in preparation for this was when you're planning a security, like the defense of your organization, at the end of the day, the best tools can be offset by a burnt out employee, just rushing through the task, like you mentioned, Phil. So it's definitely the efficacy of the tasks that they're doing, like really they're very important tasks. So we have to do them right every time. And if you're burnt out, that's gonna lag. And also, deep work versus shallow work. If you're switching that context, the things that really need that deep work, switching to the shallow work of alert analysis and someone like your situation, Phil, that's going to negatively impact both of the quality of both of those things. So, yeah, major impact of having to do those things and losing that motivation for the team.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into the actual, what can we do about it? So I don't think we have to convince anybody that burnout's a thing in cybersecurity, but what do we do about it? And with that, I'm just going to pass it to Joe. How do you view the strategies of what you can do to take action here?
I think there's many strategies that you can leverage to enrich our cybersecurity employees' careers and the work in general. One of them is job rotation. So I love within a department and the security team, or within the whole security team, depending on the size of your organization, I love switching up jobs, giving an analyst responsibilities to work with identity and identity access management, having them shift to role-based access controls, vulnerability management. One, it gives them experience in different areas. And one of the things as a security leader that we really want to do is help mentor them, help grow their career. We accomplish some of that by giving them experiences in various aspects of cybersecurity. But the other selfish reason that I like to do that is because if we're doing our job as mentors, unfortunately, there's only so many directors of security. There's only so many CISOs that are out there. So employees naturally in their careers go from organization to organization. We're reducing that risk within our own teams that when somebody leaves, and they will leave, that we have those backup resources that understand the various aspects of our program. Another area to talk about is automation. So
Sorry,
some of these,
before we get into automation, I just wanted to, Phil, one of the things that when we had been talking, you were talking about job rotation, and you work in a very stable organization with people having tenures measured in decades. Have you seen like any downstream impacts, and does that resonate with you, the idea of job rotation and cross training?
Absolutely, yeah. The example that Ben's talking about, we were chatting about an individual I had who was with our organization for 42 years. And his last 17, 18 were with IT security. Essentially, he started our IT security team. Like Joe mentioned, like you're going to have people that leave, right? And in this case, it wasn't a bad reason. They weren't burned out. They weren't looking, it was like, hey, I'm done my career. I'm going to retire now, which was great for him. The downside to losing that individual is he had a lot of intimate company knowledge, right? He had relationships across the organization. He had processes that he built and followed that maybe weren't fully documented because he was the one and only guy for the longest time, right? So when that individual left, some of the other individuals in the team, may have felt the burnout, obviously, because they're trying to catch up. They didn't have 42 years of company knowledge to rely on, or those relationships to fall back on to say, hey, I saw this alert. I know you're the person to talk to. Tell me what's going on, right? They didn't have that kind of stuff. So the longevity, while great, also has that impact. And going to the job rotation piece, that definitely has that ability to do that cross training. And on the flip side of having the long-term employees, we also are kind of blessed in the fact that we're a small team for that reason. Job rotation, we don't really rotate jobs. I have 3 security analysts. They're all involved in everything, right? So we kind of naturally have that rotation just because of the small, nature of the team, that they're all involved with EDR. They're all involved with identity. They're all involved with, triaging SOC alert type of stuff. So they kind of naturally get that just in their day-to-day, that they're not stuck and kind of pigeonholed to one specific focused task or area. But I definitely agree with Joe, like, the repetitiveness, if you're, especially for larger organizations where things are a little bit more siloed, if all you deal with on a day-to-day basis is identity, you're going to get bored a little bit, and being able to kind of branch outside of that not only gives you that something new and fresh to focus on, but it also may help you connect things better too. You kind of get the why behind certain things that other areas of the team might do, just because, I can see what they do here, and that's how it connects to this thing that I'm doing, and kind of gives more of that big picture in general.
Yeah, one of the things that we run into sometimes with rotating analysts around here is that when you get a fresh set of eyes or like a new hire, you see those things that we all know because this is what we've been doing for 3 years, but now the documentation's 3 years old. So like the living nature of that documentation where, we really need to go back and update this thing. A lot of times getting those fresh eyes on something when you've worked on something so often, and asking those critical questions is really helpful too.
Yep. And it highlights those things that the individual that was responsible just maybe didn't think about, because it's one of those, like, you can't see the forest through the trees, right? If I'm always doing this, I know it, and I know it well, but then that outside person may come in and be like, well, did you think about X? Oh, yeah, why didn't I do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Phil, you bring up one point that I just want to emphasize because it resonated so much with me. When you have those long tenured employees who have been around for a while, 15 years in some cases, like you mentioned, and then they leave, that can be such an overwhelming experience to the employees who remain. So, and then truly a source of burnout in and of itself. So making sure that you mitigate those risks by providing that skill set to multiple employees and make sure that people can fill the other's shoes is really, really important, especially because if one person leaves and then the onus is put on more people as you're trying to recruit, of course, the hiring process takes time. It can perpetuate, a second employee leaves, all of a sudden, there's that much more pressure on the organization. So that continuity within the team and mitigating that in a variety of ways we're going to talk about today, I think is really important.
Yep, agreed.
Another topic that can help, but certainly is not the all-encompassing solution, is automation. There are some activities that when you see that they are very specific, very systematic, where you can automate, by all means, automate. Few examples there are, vulnerability management. You could automate ticket creation, whether it's looking at static code analysis tools and reacting to, if you're not in line with your static code analysis tools, reacting to alerts there. Automating vulnerabilities within your vulnerability management platform, and automatically creating tickets for critical CVEs or whatever risk model you're using within your vulnerability management platform. Those are just repetitive tasks that are constantly happening throughout the organization. And I can't put enough emphasis on identity access management. Those access requests, while it's hard to build a system, and smaller companies struggle with the ROI on this, but wherever you can build role-based access controls based on a person's job across multiple systems, and then roll that out through your identity access management solution, automated provisioning of the user, automated deprovisioning of the user based on HR events. Those are very, very prescriptive, very systematic activities that if you have the right development organization and the right tools in place, by all means, leveraging automation for some of those so that it happens much more efficiently than with a human analyst is a great benefit.
So one of the things that this kind of ties into the job rotation component is at least at Expel, obviously the thing that we do is alert management, incident management. And so one of the things that like a process that we have here is when once a year an analyst or a engineer will actually do a ride along and close some alerts with guidance from an MDR analyst. So we're going to make sure we're doing the right thing. We're going to have a different set of eyes actually work through the process, because I'm sure a lot of you all are thinking the same thing. I'm thinking when people are like, we need to automate more. It's like, where are we going to find the time to do that if we're already slammed with the high volume repetitive tasks? Or, maybe the skill sets that we have on the team, like the one engineer that we hire, or the really engineering minded analyst that we have is busy building something else. So how can we get more involvement from the organization and more involvement from people that maybe are interested in what's going on with the cybersecurity team? Because the engineers really enjoy it when they do that. And then it's also fun from the analyst perspective to get to share, what the work that you do, and talk through with people. I think most organizations in the tech space do some version of a hackathon each quarter or each year, being able to be like, hey, maybe this is a chance for us to get some rotation, some relationships across the organization, and then have some automation built out for us as well.
Yeah, and the automation there too, kind of add on the kind of going back to my example with the employee that left, right? And we lost a lot of knowledge. Being able to build out not just the automation task, but more formalized or mature like SOPs and playbooks, right? To kind of help that transition of maybe we can't automate the task, but at least when the task now comes to me, I've got something I can follow because I don't have that intimate company knowledge yet. So here's an SOP that says, when this type of thing happened, I did X, Y, and Z, and here's my playbook to follow. I know with that individual, it was like his last year when I knew he was going to be retiring, it's like, we're getting everything you can out of here, and we're trying to formalize that more into SOPs and stuff like that.
Yeah, almost automating or documentation is pre-automation of sorts.
Right. You're automating the decision, maybe not the steps, but the actual decision behind what should be done.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
And really,
Joe?
when we're talking about automation, we're talking about shifting that responsibility from an employee to a process. And a similar strategy there is, rather than automate, or in addition to automating, leveraging third-party services. So shifting that responsibility to another vendor. A caveat first, and I always try not to use the word outsourcing because it makes teams very, very nervous. I don't view third-party vendor partnerships as a mechanism to downsize security teams. Frankly, as Philip mentioned, our security teams are working so hard every day and have more than enough to fill their plates. But when we can outsource certain responsibilities to third parties, it actually enriches our own employees' careers and the activities that they're working on. They can really focus on more strategic projects, strategies, and just have a much more fulfilling work life. So a few of those examples, one of which is MDR, transferring the detection of malicious activity. And one of the things that I think is important when we talk about MDR is differentiating between MSSP and MDR. And there's a big, big differentiation. I'm not going to pick on any particular vendors, not going to call anybody out on either side. But with MSSPs, my perspective is that those vendors are ingesting logs. They're ingesting perhaps your SIM, all of your data, as much of your data as possible from security tools. But MSSPs are then taking those alerts and communicating them back to you. So you're still receiving low fidelity alerts, and you're still spinning your wheels with triaging that. Maybe you don't have to look for all of them, but there are going to be a lot of false positives that are there. The differentiation with MDR, from my perspective, is high fidelity. MDRs, in my experience, and I've worked with about a dozen of them, have the ability to look in a more meaningful way at those alerts. They're enriching the alerts with threat intelligence. They're looking not just at the alert from EDR, email, authentication into your identity management system. They're looking at the sequence of events and the correlation rules that happen to really paint the picture of a behavior and a series of activities that, with much more fidelity, identifies an attacker. And the benefit there is that when you find the right MDR for your organization, they're ingesting all of your data. And when you get an alert, when you get an investigation and they say, hey, we need you to look at something, there still might be a few false positives, but you're going to receive, with a much higher percentage, you're going to receive real incidents that require triaging.
Yeah, Joe, our organization is case in point for that exact scenario. You know, we used to use more of an MSP model where we had a third party who was managing a SIM type solution for us, and it was exactly that. It's like, hey, they're ingesting all this data, great. Here's the alerts, you know. But then we got into that those high volume events of like, okay, I got to triage that alert. What is it? You know, is it a false positive? Do I need to go correlate with some other source to figure out what's going on? And when we went through a project to essentially replace that with an MDR service, it was, we want something that's more high fidelity because we are a small team. I don't want to waste cycles trying to go correlate and collect other evidence. I want to have that kind of pulled together for me with everything else. And hey, here's what we detect. Here's a recommendation on what to do based on the behavior, you know, that we're kind of profiling. And that way, when they got it, it was actionable. Hey, cool, I know what to do. I'm going to go take care of this. Now I can more easily shift back to that other task I was doing because I'm not wasting time trying to go collect all this stuff and figure out what's my decision on this event. Now, how do I need to handle it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think too, I'm sorry, Ben, I think too, an example of each. So I was working with an MSSP and I got an alert. One of my team members got an alert a couple weeks ago. And they said, you know, hey, we have a user that tried to log into Office 365 10 times within 10 minutes incorrectly. Great, thank you. So what? There's nothing that I can do with that. Were they successful in authenticating? No. Good. We also have multi-factor as a second layer of defense. To compare and contrast that, an MZR recently provided an alert to me that was a true incident in which a user was authenticating to Office 365 successfully. They didn't usually authenticate through a VPN. This time they were. So interesting behavioral detection there. And immediately after they authenticated, they started building Outlook rules to move certain emails into the trash and marking them as read. So on one hand, we have, authentication from one data source. On another hand, we have 3 different data sources or 3 different activities that are all correlated together, providing a much more meaningful story on something that I need to investigate.
Yep.
And obviously this, as Expel, we have a bias here. We believe in the outsourcing and the MDR thing. Also from my personal perspective, like hearing these stories means a lot to us and helps reduce burnout in our teams because, our mission is to give you all space to do the time, like the things that you need to do to advance your security program, protect our customers, help them get better. So being able to do that, like this feels a little salesy, and so we have a bunch of other things to talk at, but the or other examples, but from the MDR perspective, this is the thing that we do, is to try and get those stories where we freed you up to do the other thing. So it's great to hear that, and thank you all for sharing that. Joe, do you have any other examples of outsourcing that you provide to customers?
Sure. A couple of years ago, I was the CISO for a online retailer. And one of the things that we had a challenge of with that organization was a lot of lookalike websites. They sold a expensive product, high dollar figure product. And there was a lot of adversaries out there actually replicating the website, replicating the products, and impersonating this particular company. So account takedowns become a big topic. And if you've ever experienced this, working with legal, working with service providers, doing the back and forth, it's a very specialized skill set, very specialized communications, but it can really consume a lot of time. There are services that can do that on your behalf, actually for a very cost-effective fee. So account takedowns, website takedowns are really, really important. As I mentioned, third-party risk management. There are platforms and services where both from an outbound perspective, communicating your third-party assessments to your potential vendors that you're going to work with can be leveraged through a platform and through automation, and keeping track of all of those vendors and their security posture, as well as recording your own security posture and then communicating that through the platform to your inbound questionnaires is extremely helpful. A few others, phishing, incident response. So hopefully everyone on the call has a robust email threat prevention platform or a set of platforms. We know that 91% of breaches start with an email, but whether you're using a third-party product, your own email products within Microsoft, within Google, or hopefully both, in my opinion, there's still things that are going to fall through. And we enable our users to report those phishings. Those are hard to detect, especially when they're unknown, when they're, emerging threats. So leveraging a third party to triage that, not only confirm if it's a bad email or not, if it's a phishing email, but then looking at who clicked on it, who else received that email, and how can we pull that out. Great way to leverage a third party to perform those types of tasks. And those are just a few that I could think of. What about you, Phil? Did I miss any that we've talked about previously?
I don't think so. The phishing one you're going through, I agree with you. And there's a lot of tool sets. When you talk about outsourcing or even automation, kind of combining those two, I mean that the beauty of the increase of AI and machine learning capabilities is a lot of those functions like that are great to move to a tool like that, because they can use those technologies now to, make those tasks that we had to do manually before a lot better. I mean, machine learning, it's good at data crunching, right? Let me take these inputs and I'll crunch it and I'll give you a result output and make a decision and do a task. And that's a great example of kind of tying those two together of how do I outsource it and automate it. I know there's tool sets around that can do just that, of like, cool, someone reported phishing, it'll evaluate that report, add that context in that they said it was suspicious, can make a decision, act on it, respond back to the user, and your team may not ever touch it, but it's adding value back to the business of that protection.
And I, as a company, again, calling out Expel's bias here, we do have a phishing service line here.
I wasn't even thinking of yours, actually. I was thinking of another one when I was saying that example, but
yeah, one of the things that, like, one of the benefits of from our perspective is that the actual investigative process and like the type of skill set that you need is really overlapped for MDR and phishing. I mean, those are roughly the same. Phishing user submitted stuff is very high volume, and it's a great way for us to get like job rotation and new folks into the field, get exposure to things when the volume is high enough that this can be their job, and a lot of organizations, it's like, based on conversations with customers, it's a small part of their total overall job. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely like the phishing and MDR and, doing those things that are within our wheelhouse. Like we get a lot of the other strategies, like you talked about, job rotation and automation, come into play for your providers too when they do that, which is probably why you see a lot of folks taking that approach in the provider space.
Yeah. One thing I did want to mention, because I'm sure it's a question for at least one person, because I know I've had the same thing in the past, is like, you talk about being able to outsource those things, right? I think Joe made that comment earlier, which we all know is like being asked to do more with less, right? Helping to avoid burnout by moving things to an outsourced model, moving certain functions to outsource is a great idea. But then you run into that caveat of like, I only have a certain amount of budget, right? And what am I supposed to do? How do I get buy-in if I want to move this thing, but it costs money, right? And I don't have that in the budget, which is a hard position to be in for anybody, because you're kind of stuck in trying to figure out, well, how do I approach it? And I always try to go back to that idea of like, overarching, our goal is to reduce risk of the organization. And if you have a security program that's kind of built on, potentially any of the frameworks that are out there, and it kind of helps drive what some of your strategic initiatives are, those strategic initiatives are reducing the risk of what's most risky for the business, right? So if you identify, hey, third-party risk management is a big risk for us, cool. We want to get to a certain maturity level of that, and I have one of two ways to accomplish it. I can either ramp up staff and have the right tool set and do it myself, or I can spend money over here and do it. And sometimes I kind of have to go back and like lean that decision back to the business of like, we want to mature to here. Here's how I can do it. You decide whether or not to spend that money, because sometimes you're stuck in that budget discussion of like, I just can't afford it. And maybe we need to take that risk of like, I can't outsource it and I can't staff up, and we're going to assume the risk. But if it's a risk, a high enough risk for the business, maybe they make that decision of like, okay, we're going to change the budget a little bit. We're going to let you buy that service, an outsourced service, and it helps shift that over there. And then obviously that accounts to helping remediate potentially some of that burnout.
So if I can, making sure that I'm clocking if you're in this situation, getting budget's tough, you're able to have the conversation where you're like, in order for us, we can drive these positive business outcomes with the deep work things if we and make more money for the business in the core parts of what they do if we pay this much to outsource this repetitive task that is going to drive us away from the third party risk management or the website takedown or whatever it is. By freeing us up, we'll be able to drive the actual like strategic initiatives versus paying a lot of money to not make as much forward progress as we'd like. Is that accurate?
Right. It
Awesome.
just, it helps with that, I think, with that budget discussion of kind of putting it back to the business of what risk are we reducing? What's most important to you as the business to help you achieve your business goals? If reducing this risk for you helps your business goals, how do we take care of that? And if it's outsourcing, because that might be the best way, it helps with that decision of like, I'm not just in here asking for budget to add tools, right? I'm doing it for a certain strategic purpose that helps your business goal, and it helps kind of move that decision potentially off of you as that IT security leader to more of a business decision with several individuals involved.
Gotcha. ROI and whatnot.
Mhm.
So one of the things that you talked about, Joe, was outsourcing, and it sounds like you have strong opinions about how to do that effectively. What do you look for when you're trying to assess like a good third party?
Great question, Ben. And let me give a caveat first about that. So all the practitioners out there, if you're looking to outsource a particular function within your security team, you need to be very careful that you don't take that process exactly the way your company does it today and ship that to another vendor. Those vendors have methodologies, and frankly, they are experts in those areas. You need to tweak your processes to the best practice of those vendors to be the most efficient. If you just transfer your process to the vendor, you're not going to be as successful, because then that vendor is trying to adjust their own internal processes. So you have to have flexibility and be willing to accept the processes that the third party prescribes. But with that, when you're outsourcing to a third party, first and foremost, you have to have that feeling that you are creating an extension of your security team. Those companies, whether it be MDR, third-party risk, they are truly serving as part of your organization now. And if you don't have that feeling in the initial calls, if you're not getting that feeling when you're talking about what day-to-day operations look like, that's probably not the right vendor for you. The second aspect, and you've heard me use this term quite a bit, is high fidelity. It's really important to make sure that this extension of your team is going to be interacting with you back and forth. They're not taking something completely off your plate. There is going to be some discussion and dialogue back and forth. And it's really important that the questions that you are getting are high fidelity alerts, high fidelity actions that are really meaningful versus more busy work. The wrong third parties, and many of the third parties that are out there, will create new work for your organization with that back and forth. So you have to be very careful about that and understand and query the vendors when you're going through the selection process of what does that workflow look like? What do I still have to do? And what are our team's responsibilities versus yours?
Yeah, Joe, I would echo that 100% because I think we've all been there in some aspect, because the goal of outsourcing is to shift those cycles off somewhere else to free you up to do other things. And if you're not reducing that workload on that task where you're adding new stuff, it's not worth it then, right? You're not making your own team's job easier. You're just changing what it is they have to do on the same type of functions. But
And in some cases, it's even worse, right? Because now all of a sudden you have the CIO, you have the CFO saying, well, we paid to get rid of this. Why are you guys still spinning your wheels there? So it can almost be worse finding the wrong partner, because the expectation is that you're going to have more bandwidth. You're going to be able to work more intelligently, more strategically.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, well, we're coming up on about 9 minutes left, and we got some time for questions. Just a real quick summary. So the what and why of burnout, both the repetitive high volume, low value tasks, as well as the low volume, high impact tasks. The team's connection to the mission, feeling like they're just turning a crank versus actually growing themselves and helping the organization. And then the unrelenting nature where it's like the on-call, you never get to turn it off. What are the impacts of that? Well, people wind up being less effective at their role, introducing more risk to your organization, and your job is to drive down risk in the organization. Also takes time to hire people if they go looking for the next thing. What can you do about it? Well, help the team grow, rotate jobs, give them cross training, get them exposure, get them something fresh, help them grow. And then using automation and outsourcing and some combination of that, you can wind up driving down the repetitive high volume, low value tasks, on call, as well as a lot of the that feeling of not being put in a position to succeed by the team when you get something that is high impact, low volume. So with that, let's move to question section. We'll be checking the Q&A, and if you have any questions, pop them in there and we can talk about it. So we have one question right now, and I'm going to go ahead and read that out. So from an anonymous attendee, and I won't name names, even if you put them in there. We're curious to hear what Philip and Joe do to manage their own burnout, because we all know how we show up as leaders influence how our teams feel, right? So behavior reflects leadership. So what do you all do to manage that?
Yeah, I'll start there. I know in our prep we kind of talked about this, and I threw out an example of something that we do. So outside of our organization, we have relationships with other companies, and it's a lot of Hershey related entities that we deal with, like the Milton Hershey School, Hershey Foods, some other Hershey related entities. But years ago, we set up something we call the Meeting of the Minds, which is just a dumb name that we came up with basically. But about once a month or every other month, we'll get together and just talk about stuff that's going on. Because a lot of us have similar things happening. We use same tool sets. We have similar processes, right? It's not like we're doing everything completely unique. And it's just a way for us to kind of vent to each other of like, hey, I'm working through this thing. What are you guys seeing? What are you doing? How do you approach this? And they may throw out an idea or two of like, oh, I tried this and that worked well, and I tried this one and that was horrible, right? But it's mostly just a like kind of vent, right? Just to get it out there, like kind of gives you that feeling of like, you're not the only one in that position, right? And tying back at the burnout, like, you're not the only person, the only team, the only organization that may be dealing with that. And how are they trying to approach it and things like that. So it just, just gives you kind of a place to talk, and, it's work related, but not really directly work focused. And in our case, a lot of times we're doing it at a brewery that's down the street. So, yeah, have a beer in your hand when you're talking about it, and that sometimes might help. But again, it's just a way to like kind of talk about with other individuals outside of your direct focus of like, what are you guys doing for very similar things, and get feedback.
That community aspect, right? Like that, am I alone in this? Because yeah, I feel like the folks I talk to, and I know I feel it myself too, is that like it can feel very lonely and it can feel very stressful, and being like getting that perspective and that having that community of people to help problem solve, and maybe learn from somebody else's mistakes or their successes goes a long way for me as well. Joe, what do you do?
A few things there. So one, work-life balance, I think, is very important to CISOs, making sure that you're carving out the time for friends, family, and that you're not overworking and in front of your computer, 18 hours a day. But the other part of that really relates to what we've been talking about earlier, and those repetitive tasks that your employees are doing. Funny that Phil mentions the brewery. I'm thinking, and I'm going to date myself with this reference, but I'm thinking of like the Laverne and Shirley, television show in the beginning, where all the bottles they're working in a brewery and all the bottles are piling up, and eventually they just all start falling. Well, that happens when you have high volume, and all of a sudden your employees are shifting more and more activities to you, more and more questions to you, because they're nervous they're going to miss something. So by giving them relief and having them work on more strategic activities, you're able to actually empower them, make sure that you're educating them on your expectations and what types of decisions they can make on your behalf. That helps them build their career they feel more enriched in their day-to-day lives, and they're putting less on you and managing that expectation of what do I need to know about as a CISO, and what are the things that you can make your own decisions about.
Yeah, pushing this a lot of the decision, the conversation to the team sometimes is very helpful because it's, you know, encouraging them of like, if you're feeling burnout, tell me, like, what are you feeling? Why are you think you're feeling it? Like, let's talk through it, you know, and what suggestions or recommendations do they have, and not just get stuck in the day-to-day process of it, because maybe they're like, hey, we're doing this thing over and over again. What if we did X and we automated this little piece of it, or we did, you know, like they've got their own ideas, right? They're the ones doing it every day, you know, encouraging them to voice that out of like, how do we make it better? How do we improve? You know, how do we make your lives easier? Is great, because there's a lot of good ideas on the team, and we don't always want to be the ones as leaders trying to drive the process. They're the ones driving the car. Let them tell you what parts aren't working properly and replace that tire that's not doing well, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah, the fine-grained nature of our solutions, like the further away from the problem you get, the more you go from like a small hammer to a sledgehammer. And it's just like, I'm not going to solve this as effectively as you can solve it. It's just going to, yeah. And I think the other, you know, to your point, Joe, like one of the things that I feel at times is I think security folks tend to overown, and it feels like tend to be team focused, and it feels like delegating some of the tasks that are repetitive for me is like going to be negative for the team. And I have to remind myself that that's actually a growth opportunity for them. The same way that when my boss delegates something that like is something he's done 100 times. Well, it's still my first time doing it, and it's that new exposure, and it's almost a miniature form of job rotation. You know, it's responsibility rotation. So hey, let me delegate this down and help you grow. It's not shirking responsibility. It's actually a growth moment, and that gives me a lot of positive, you know, feelings as well. Reduces my burnout. Awesome. Well, we're coming up on time. With that, I want to go ahead and be sure that folks, you know, if you want to continue the discussion, there was a poll. Reach out to us, reach out to anybody, you know, or reach out to Expel. I won't volunteer you, Phil, to go get beers with everybody. But be on the we have this ebook. Check it out, and then with that, I'll pass it over to the rest of the team. Thank you guys so much, Phil, Joe. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure getting to work with you all on this and getting to, you know, hear your perspectives. I've learned a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.